Welcome to Your Family's Health. This is Dr. Janine Cook-Garrard from the Department of Nursing here at Nassau Community College. Your Family's Health is a program that focuses on healthcare issues and resources available here in Nassau County. On the show, we will be speaking to experts from around the country to keep you up to date on current healthcare issues and trends. Today, we will be speaking to Eileen Ennis about her book, You Wouldn't Understand. So if you want to know more about how to stay healthy in Nassau County, stay tuned for the next half hour to the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Welcome to the show, Eileen.
Thank you.
I just want to say that, Eileen, just good to have you. Looking at your book here, it's so vibrant, colorful, and it has caricatures on it. Just to give the audience a little bit about who you are, you're a social worker working in the field for over 20 years. You are experienced in the field of death and dying.
Yes.
And just to say that this book really talks to the child during their grieving process.
Right.
So you have a lot of experience in death and dying, and also having a master's. I think your master's degree is also in
social work.
In social work. And so you counsel people in the bereavement also with their grief work as it relates to any catastrophic situation that has happened or death, but particularly to the child who has experienced loss. Is that right?
Yes. I mostly worked with children, but also with parents, and obviously helping the parents understand the child's grieving process and how to work with the child on that.
So I also want to introduce someone else who's with us. That's Naila Garrard. She happens to be my daughter.
Hello.
She's from Acullies College, and she's a rising junior with the emphasis of anthropology and international studies. Welcome, Naila.
Thanks for having me. Just
pulling her into this is very relevant because she is also understanding how it feels to lose someone very important and what an individual or child goes through during this whole process. Tell me, your experience extends beyond just social work. Who else have you partnered with, I understand, the Red Cross, and who else?
I was a mental health volunteer through the American Red Cross, and I'd helped after September 11th downtown. I'd also done debriefings with the New York City Police Department, and a lot of crisis intervention after September 11th.
Oh, very important.
Through houses of worship, through individuals, in particular people who were had family members who had died down there.
So just curious, what motivated you to write this book?
Well, as Janine was saying earlier, that all of the years that I'd worked in children's bereavement, all of those years, and working with kids who had experienced a sudden death versus an expected death, certainly helped. However, my son, coincidentally, a couple of years ago, this is where the book was born out of, his teacher had suddenly died. Mm-hmm. So in helping him through that, it gave me a different perspective now as the parent, as opposed to being the professional who was helping parents. It was now me. So that helped me through that with the process and in writing it, because I had to set it up where, what was the child thinking? How would they respond? How would a parent respond? How should I respond as the therapist? So it was kind of a lot of back and forth with writing for over the several months that it took for me to
How old was your son when this happened?
He was 9.
He was 9.
So that was his first experience with death. Mm-hmm. And I'm very open with my children, and I talk about anything with them. So for them, it was kind of, here she comes. Here comes the social worker. But it helps them to understand about that death is a natural part of life. And as natural as that is, so is grieving. Yes. So there's no right or wrong, and don't let anybody tell you that there is. And the biggest thing for a child to walk away with is, who can I turn to?
Who can I turn to? So who did you write the book for? Is it for the child, or is it for the parent or the adult?
Yes.
It's for both.
It's for everybody. It is. It's obviously, it's written so that a child can comprehend it. And every so often, it's interesting, my children will pick up the book and will read it, either by themselves or they'll come over to me with a question, which I want to get back to that, if you could remind me. But as far as who is it for, it's for children. But I always encourage parents or any adult that's in the child's life, read it with the child. Don't hand it and say, here you go.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's not appropriate. What helps is then it helps to engage, well, what's really going on in here? And you'd be surprised at all of the questions that come up, which is why I'd also put a glossary in the back for parents that when they stumble, how do I explain cremation? How do I explain burial? That it's in the book.
So did you always know this before your child's teacher passed away? And what is the right term to use? Is it pass away, die for a child? What word do you use if someone dies? Do you say death? Do you say transition? Do you say go to heaven? Do you say angelic? What words do you use that makes it a little lighter and easier, more palatable for the child?
That's very interesting that you're phrasing it that way, too. My youngest, who is 7, came to me the other day, and he was talking about somebody who had, as he said, passed away. Now, he knows that that's not a term that I use, right, and that I was kind of stumbled by it. So I said to him, tell me, why are you using that term? And he said, because then there's the possibility that they could come back. Mm. So that's one term that I encourage parents and adults, whomever it is that's the adult in the child's life, that when we explain death, it's death. Because you don't want there any misgivings about, well, maybe. And I've heard, and you can go to sleep, and maybe you can come back. Spirituality is a whole other ball of wax, and there's nothing wrong with explaining that at all, whatever your spiritual beliefs are. I encourage that, because funerals are a part of death, and it's part of being in a family. So
you use death.
The concrete term is
term.
dead. And then in explaining, and like I said in the back of the book, it also illustrates how to explain what is dead. It's different between someone sleeping and someone who can't smell, who can't see, who can't feel, who can't hear. Right. They're not being hurt any longer. When my oldest was little, he would run out into the street. So one day we saw a dead raccoon. And this is the way to start the death conversation, is over something like this. And I said to him, do you know what happened there? And he said, well, he looks like he's sleeping. So we waited for a couple of minutes, and he said, I don't think he's sleeping. I said, no, he's not. So I had talked to him about what happened. He was hit by a car. So this was a teaching moment as well for him to understand, when you run out into the street, drivers can't necessarily see you. They didn't see that raccoon, and that's what happened. So for him, all these years later, he still brings up the dead raccoon, and he'll say the dead raccoon, and I have to keep going back to what dead is so that there's no misunderstanding. Because when you explain something as sensitive as this to a child, you want to be as concrete as possible.
So you started the conversation with your son by doing a comparison for the raccoon, if you will. Right. Is this the way you discuss it with every developmental level? If a child is 2 or 6 or 10, 15, 17, would you use this kind of approach for every developmental level?
Well, it also depends upon what your experience is with death, too. I often tell people I've been going to funerals since I'm in kindergarten, because that's the way it was in my family, was that it was expected of you and you did it. Today, not so much. I see a lot more shying away. So in explaining death, when a child is very young, when they basically have no language, it's very, very simplistic. We die from sudden deaths, whether it was a car accident or it's from a disease, whatever that is. You want to be as concrete as possible so that there's no misunderstanding. Because you and I get sick every day. We get stomach aches, we get colds. So to tell a child, well, so-and-so was sick and they died.
Right.
No, they weren't. They had a disease and it was called this. And what does that mean? What do you mean cancer? Well, cancer is, and then getting into a very simplistic explanation, again, depending upon the sophistication of the child, their developmental stage, but also their cognitive understanding as well.
What are some of the warning signs I should look out for my child after a significant death?
There are certain things that are going to happen. To begin with, sleep. And we all know this as adults, that when we have things on our mind, our sleep is what's affected. And that will happen with a child as well. But if the child starts to wet the bed, if they're crying over what seems to be nothing, nightmares, talking excessively about death themselves, missing that person to a greater extent, and or isn't talking about it at all. Mm-hmm. Those are some warning signs that would behoove you to involve the school, tell the school what's going on, because what's happening there as well is he or she not paying attention in class? Are they goofing off a lot? Are they failing? Are they not doing homework? Are they withdrawing? Are they not with their peers any longer? All of the simple, small things. So when you involve your community, you're much better off, because at least the child knows when I'm in school and I might be thinking excessively about you, because if my father died and I'm in school all day long, where's my mom? Is she okay? Is she okay? Is she okay? Schools will be very understanding of that and are there. The pediatrician is also.
So we're talking, Eileen, about resources that are available for children who may have experienced death. So the school psychologist is one resource. Do you recommend that parents take their children to therapy for any kind of support as it relates to an individual who has died close to them, or they, a death that's they have experienced in their lives?
One of the greatest things that I have witnessed is when a child is in a bereavement group, because you're finally with your peers as opposed to dictating adults. You're with your peers who get it, who understand, because your friends, maybe they don't really understand. Maybe they feel uncomfortable. Maybe they don't know what to say. But when you're with kids your age who've also experienced the death of a loved one, whomever that was, whether it was a sibling or a parent or a grandparent, a friend, they understand what that's like to go to bed at night and to cry into their pillow, or to worry so much about, if I leave here, what's going to happen. So
how do I find those kind of bereavement groups? Churches
can have them. There are hospices that have them as well, all over Long Island, that are specifically the workers who are the social workers in particular who are working there are specifically trained in working with bereaved children.
So bereavement groups, you talked about possible visit to a psychologist, a school psychologist. And I would imagine family support is very, very important for a child who has had a significant loss. What would you say for a child? I'm going to go back with what we kind of discussed before with that child who may be 3 or 4 years old who have lost someone, and it's hard for them to deal with the loss. Possibly I'm thinking of 9/11, where children lost fathers and mothers, aunts and uncles. And how do you talk about, and I know that you use the word death, but is it appropriate to ever, for that child who wants to think of their mommy who as an angel, or wants to think of their mommy as sleeping, do you clarify that for a 2-year-old and say, no, mommy is not sleeping, mommy is dead?
Right.
What is your the language, if you will, that you would use? Do you still use the term?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. All
right.